Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world. Even more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, in Georgia, in Kansas, in Missouri, in Texas, in Chicago, Illinois, in Arkansas, in California, in New York, in Pennsylvania, in Canada, Fiji Island, in Mexico, Spain, in Africa, Zambia, Pakistan, Kenya, to the United Kingdom, to our brethren in Australia, and also to our brethren in Malaysia and in Indonesia. And to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad, greetings. May the good Lord bless you, my dear brothers and sisters. This is our special episode number 12, just an hour exposition of prophetic study. As the last final warning message just prior to the close of provision. And at this time, let us focus our attention on Revelation 11, verse 2. So let us begin our study reading Revelation 11, verse 2. It says, But the court which is without the temple, leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles. And the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months. Revelation 11, verse 2. And according to the card file of B.T. Hotep, written on February 1953, just 2 years after B.T. Hotep died on February 5, 1955. So let's read. It says, It is possible that the 42 months of Revelation 11, verse 2 occupy an entirely different period of time than the 1,260 days mentioned in Revelation 13. For Jerusalem did not begin to be trodden underfoot in 538 AD, but was completely taken and destroyed in 70 AD. The holy city is still underfoot and will be until the Gentiles drive out the Gentiles as predicted in Zechariah chapter 1, verse 21. Not any part of the city will be underfoot after then, at which time the kingdom, the church purified, is set up there. The truth concerning the 42 months, during which time the holy city is trodden underfoot by the Gentiles, is therefore not completely revealed, and had better be left alone until God makes it known. So, the prophet made it so plain that concerning Revelation 11 verse 2, it was not yet completely understood. It was not completely revealed in the days of Hadad. And he died without explaining Revelation 11 verse 2. And the admonition given by the prophet says that it would be better be left alone or in other words, it is complete prohibition engaging in private interpretation, saying that it would be better to be left alone until God Himself will make it known. But such admonition of the prophet was immediately disobeyed, immediately violated after Hadad died. The Midian began to interpret the 42 months prophecy. And the result was embarrassment and confusion. But we need to understand that such prophecy will not be fulfilled and not been revealed. The statement in track number 2, page 12, saying, and never could it have been fulfilled and not been revealed. Track number 2, page 12, it says, and never could it have been fulfilled and not been revealed. Or in other words, if the prophecy will not be understood, then for what purpose they were written? It says here in Answerer number 2, page 75, these prophecies must therefore be revealed in order to strengthen the church in her final warfare. Otherwise, for what purpose were they written? In 11 symbolic code, number 8, on page 3, and page 4, I would like to read. It says, the question has frequently come to Mount Carmel since the subject of the 42 months was explained in the symbolic code, asking why the code has never said when the 42 months started and when the great earthquake of Revelation 11 is to take place. Then it says, therefore, to help clarify these questions and to emphasize the fact that God has given us sufficient information to know the seasons, The study of Jonah and the people of God, which Brother Hotep delivered June 10, 1944, has been selected for this month's issue of the Symbolic Code. Then it says, "It is true that just as the stork in the heaven knoweth her appointed times, and the turtle and the crane and the swallow observe the time of their coming," Jeremiah 8 verse 7, God has mercifully made available to His people the knowledge of the judgment of the Lord for this age, if they are willing to know it. He has not, however, seen fit at this time to make known the day and hour. He has told His people enough that they certainly need not be caught unawares as one being surprised by an unexpected thief. God has revealed the 42-month prophecy to us for no other purpose than that we be made to realize that we individually have no time to lose in cleaning ourselves up with the provision He has given us. No time to lose in getting our divinely appointed work done in the church, and no time to lose in setting our own houses in order. When God's people need more information for their own good, the Lord will not withhold it from them. 11 Symbolic Code, number 8, page 3 and page 4. There are three principal reasons why the revelation of the 42 months prophecy is in absolute importance. First, so that we as individuals, we should no longer waste our time to clean up ourselves with the provisions that God has given us. And second, no time to lose in getting our divinely appointed work done in the church. And third, no time to lose in setting our own houses in order. 11 Symbolic Code, number 8, page 3 and 4. Those three reasons indicates provisionary time. Then we can easily comprehend that such revelation must be bestowed by God prior to the close of provision. Now, let us read 2TG. Here in 2TG number 14, it says, 2TG number 14 on page 16. The subject of chapter 10 ends with the second verse of chapter 11. The verse which brings us to the time of the measuring, numbering of the people, which obviously is the numbering of the 144,000. Revelation chapter 7, verse 3 to verse 8. For they are the only numbered company of people in the thread of prophecy. Thus it is that chapter 10, including verses 1 and 2 from chapter 11, begins at the time of the end and ends with the numbering of the 144,000. TG number 14, page 16. So, the shepherd's rod made it so plain, brothers and sisters, that the first two verses in Revelation 11 is a part of the subject on Revelation chapter 10. As a matter of fact, verses 1 and 2 in Revelation 11 is the climactic point of the subject recorded on Revelation chapter 10. We explained several times that the subject on Revelation chapter 10 is pointing directly to the book of Daniel. Because that little book in Revelation 11 verse 2, according to the shepherd's rod, is none other than the book of Daniel. Now, let's read Revelation 2TG 15, page 3. It says, there is but one book in the Bible that has had to be opened, and that is the book of Daniel. Daniel 12, verse 4, 2TG 15, on page 3. So, the shepherd's rod made it so plain that the little book recorded in Revelation 10, verse 2, it is the book of Daniel. Now, there are only two main subjects on the book of Daniel. It is concerning Christ's mediatorial work in the heavenly sanctuary, by which Daniel called it the cleansing of the sanctuary. And the second main subject is concerning the deception of Satan, the deception of the devil, by which in the book of Daniel it was revealed by God by the symbolization of the exceeding great horn. In 2 Azar, page let's read the statement. The shepherd's rod declared clearly in 2SR 129. It says, the horn reveals that which the beast fails to do. Or, in other words, the beast revelation in the vision of Daniel in chapter 7 is not sufficient to reveal how the devil is deceiving God's people. But God revealed it through the symbolization of the horn. So I would like to read again, 2SR 129. The horn reveals that which the beast fails to do. Then it says, the beast representing imperial Rome, 2SR 129. The beast representing imperial Rome does not give much information regarding the Roman form of government. But that which is not revealed by the beast is made known by the goat's great horn. Therefore, we must consider the great horn's power and conduct. To us, our page 129. So, in the book of Daniel, concerning the occurrences that takes place on this earth, we need to consider the great horn power and conduct. Because only to the exceeding great horn, you can easily discern the deception of Satan. Because it was not much revealed in the symbolization of the beast recorded on Daniel chapter 7. Now let's go back to our main subject. Our main subject is Revelation 11, verse 2. The last verse, which is the climactic point of the subject in the book of Daniel. Now, brothers and sisters, I would like to remind again that Revelation chapter 11 is a part of the subject, the trumpets study. And we explained several times according to track number 5 on page 34, saying, in the main, however, the trumpets and the seals portray an event which is future from John's time and which takes place in heaven. So, the main prophetic event concerning the subject, trumpets and 7 seals, takes place in heaven. According to the shepherd's rod. And more particularly to the book of Daniel. Because the sanctuary mentioned in Daniel chapter 8 is the sanctuary in heaven. Let's read again the statement on track number 3 on page 53, saying, this startling revelation shows conclusively that the cleansing according to Daniel 8 verse 14 is first of the sanctuary in heaven and second of the sanctuary on earth. So the shepherd's rod made it so plain that concerning the book of Daniel, the cleansing takes place first in the sanctuary in heaven, before the cleansing of the sanctuary on earth. Now, concerning the cleansing in the heavenly sanctuary, there are only two cleansing. The sanctuary itself, and then the books. So I would like to repeat again. Concerning the cleansing that takes place in the heavenly sanctuary, there are two cleansing. The cleansing of the sanctuary itself and the cleansing of the books. For example, here on Consecrated Way to Christian Perfection, let's read. It says, page 113, the cleansing of the sanctuary. It says, Consecrated Way to Christian Perfection, the cleansing of the sanctuary. The cleansing of the sanctuary and the finishing of the mystery of God are identical as to time, and are also so closely related as to be practically identical in character and event. We know the word identical meaning absolutely the same. So, the cleansing of the sanctuary and the finishing of the mystery of God are identical. And we know that the finishing of the mystery of God is found on Revelation chapter 10, verse 6 and verse 7. So, Revelation chapter 10 is a very important subject. Remember, brothers and sisters, the subject of Revelation chapter 10 ended with the numbering of the 144,000. So let us read again the statement on 2TG number 14. 2TG number 14, page 16. It says, thus it is, 2TG 14, page 16. Thus it is that chapter 10, including verses 1 and 2, from chapter 11, begins at the time of the end. When does the time of the end begins? 1844. Let's read first the Old Symbolic Code. Here in the Old Symbolic Code, 3 Symbolic Code, 8 to 10, page 8. 3 Symbolic Code, 8 to 10, page 8. It says, this time must have begun when the book began to be opened. But if we must declare the beginning of the time in more specific terms, it, in a spatial sense, began in the year 1844. When does the time of the end begun? In the year 1844. Now let's go back again to the reading in 2TG number 14 on page 16. 2TJ number 14, page 16. It says, thus it is that chapter 10, including verses 1 and 2 from chapter 11, begins at the time of the end and ends with the numbering of the 144,000. So the climactic point, brothers and sisters, the end part of the subject on Revelation chapter 10 ended with the numbering of the 144,000 living saints, according to the shepherd's rod. Now, I would like to read track number 5. So, let's read. Track number 5 on page 100. It says here, events to take place just before the seventh trumpet sounds. Track number 5, page 100. Events to take place just before the seventh trumpet sounds. And what is that event? It says, Revelation 10, verses 1 to 3, and Revelation 10, verse 8, 9, and 10. Revelation 10, verse 8, verse 9, and 10 has a double application. But Revelation 10, verse 1 and 3 has only a single fulfillment of that prophetic event. The primary application of Revelation 10, verse 8, verse 9, and 10 is applied to the experience of William Miller. When they ate the little book, sweet as honey in their mouth, but become bitter in their belly. And the significance is that they experience great disappointment. But the second application must be to God's people in the last generation of men, by which the significance that it become bitter in their belly is that they experience delay. And that's the reason why it is directly applied to the experience of William Miller, because disappointment is more bitter than delay. So here in the Great Controversy, 393, it says, the Great Controversy, 393, it says, this had a personal experience, a faith in God and in His Word, which could not be overthrown by disappointment and delay. So I would like to read again the statement. It says, this had a personal experience, a faith in God, and in His Word, which could not be overthrown by disappointment and delay. And as far as the shepherd's rod is thus concerned, here in 11 symbolic code, let's read number 12 on page 9. It says, I suppose you would say they were the Millerites, but to this I cannot agree, because there was no delay for them. They had set the date for Christ's coming, and the outcome for them was not a delay, but a bitter disappointment. 11 symbolic code, number 12, page 9. The voice of inspiration made it so plain that there was no delay. Because disappointment is not a delay. And also delay is not a disappointment. Because delay is only a postponement. But disappointment, it was totally disappeared. Brothers and sisters, so the experience of William Miller, or the Millerites movement, is disappointment, not delay. But according to the voice of inspiration, disappointment and delay, indicating that the experience of delays must be in the judgment that pertains to the living. And that is the reason why there are some Davidians or Shepherd's Rod believers saying that our message does not come from heaven. Because according to them, we set the date and the event did not happen. Yes, your testimony is our experience. Otherwise, the Bible and for prophecy is not telling the truth. That the people of God in the last generation of men, they will experience delay. Brothers and sisters, as the fulfillment of Revelation 10, verse 8, verse 9, and 10. Now, and that is why I remember that reading, brothers and sisters, accordingly. Here, let me read to you this statement. That such delay, in reality, I would like to read here. It says, if they have made a mistake, as to their calculations of the exact day in which they expected the event to occur, it does not disprove the doctrine. It says it only subjects them to greater trials and urges them to exhort one another, and so much the more as they see the day approaching. I would like to read again. The statement says, if they have made a mistake as to their calculations of the exact day in which they had expected the event to occur, no, it does not disprove the doctrine. Although it only subjects them to greater trials and urges them to exhort one another, and so much the more as they see the day approaching. Now let's go back to our subject, brothers and sisters. Remember, the Shepherd's Rod says that before the seventh trumpet sounds his trumpet, the events to take place is first Revelation 10 verse 8, 9 and 10, and then Revelation 10 verse 1, verse 2, and verse 3. So let's read Revelation 10 verse 1, verse 2, and verse 3. And I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his face was it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. And he had in his hand a little book opened, And he set his right foot upon the sea, and his left foot on the earth, and cried with a loud voice, as when a lion roareth. And when he had cried, 7 thunders uttered their voices. Revelation 10, verse 1, verse 2, and verse 3. Remember, this is the last event to take place before the 7th angel sound the 7th trumpet, or before the 7th angel sound his trumpet. Now the shepherd's rod made itself plain here on 2TG. Number 15. 2TG number 15, page 3. So let's read 2TG number 15 on page 3. It says, that which is to be during the 6th trumpet, while provision is still last. It says, that which is to be during the 6th trumpet, while provision is still last. So, the voice of inspiration says that this prophecy will be fulfilled during the 6th trumpet. But, is it during the sounding of the 6th trumpet, or during the period of the 6th trumpet? Let us distinctly separate the sounding and the period itself, because the sounding precedes the period. That is very logical. If you will make an announcement, it must be before the said event will take place. Now let's read 2TG number 15, page 3. It says, and I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head. And his face was as it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. Then it says, this angel has all the characteristics of a power that sends down the latter rain, and that causes the spiritual grain fully to develop. For that is what cloud, sunshine, and rainbow indicate. As a rainbow never appears without rain, the angel is therefore the angel that brings the rain and the sunshine for the development of the final harvest. Even in a glance, this angel cannot be applied to William Miller. Because according to the shepherd's rod, this angel, this messenger, he brought down the latter rain. The latter rain message which brings final development for the final harvest. As far as the shepherd's rod is thus concerned, I would like to read the reading here on the Old Symbolic Code. It says here, let's read the statement. 1 Symbolic Code number 5, page 5. It says, as to the time of the former and the latter rain, 1 Symbolic Code number 5 on page 5. As to the time of the former and the latter rain, the former, according to the meaning of the word, preceding in time or place, must naturally precedes the latter. Therefore, the desire of ages is correct. For to the church, before the shepherd's rod came, the experience of the apostles was the former rain. Whereas to us at the present time, the former rain is the spirit of prophecy, and the latter rain, it is the shepherd's rod. One symbolic code, number 5, on page 5. Remember, brothers and sisters, the subject of Revelation chapter 10, according to 2TG number 14, page 16, begins in the time of the end. And in 3 symbolic code, 8 to 10, page 8, the time of the end, in more specific terms, begun in the year 1844, or October 22, 1844. And such subject ended on Revelation 11 verse 2, by which it points out to the time of the numbering of the 144,000 living saints, as is stated in 2TG 14 on page 16. Now let's go back again, brothers and sisters, to our subject, Revelation chapter 10. We already read, brothers and sisters, that according to track number 5, page 100, that before the 7th angel sounded his trumpet, the events recorded on Revelation 10, verse 8, verse 9, verse 10, and Revelation 10, verse 1, verse 2, and verse 3 must be fulfilled first. Now, we already explained that Revelation 10, verse 8, 9, and 10 has a double application, because the midnight cry has a double application. As a matter of fact, it is even more directly applied in the judgment that pertains to the living. According to 2SR, page 181. Now let's read again the statement here. 2SR, page 181. The midnight cry was first proclaimed prior to 1844, and the coming of the bridegroom was Christ coming to the most holy place in the heavenly sanctuary for the investigative judgment of the saints. The investigation being in 2 sections, first the judgment for the dead, and the second for the living. The cry must be repeated. Otherwise, we would have no present truth for the time of the judgment of the living. The cry for the living being of a greater importance to the world than the one for the dead, and as the virgins are a figure of the living church, the parable must have a direct application to the church at this present time, the coming of the bridegroom for the judgment of the living. 2SR, page 181. So Revelation 10, verse 8, verse 9, and 10 has a double application. In the primary application, they experience disappointment. But in the final and direct application, they will experience delay. And that is why Matthew 25 is directly applied in the period of the judgment that pertains to the living, because the parable only foretold us that the righteous, the wise virgins, they will experience delay. And it is contrary to the experience of William Miller. because they experienced disappointment. And according to 11 Symbolic Code, number 12, page 9, there was no delay for them. What they did experience is a bitter disappointment. And disappointment is not a delay. So the only verse that express the experience of the Millerites movement is found in Revelation 10, verse 8, verse 9, and verse 10. It is directly applied to them because the significance of bitter in their belly, disappointment is more bitter than delay. So it is directly applied to the experience of William Miller. But it is indirectly applied to the experience of God's people in the judgment that pertains to the living. Because they will experience only delay. And delay is not as bitter as the disappointment. But Matthew 25, it is opposite. It is applied to William Miller only indirectly. But the direct application is in the judgment that pertains to the living. Because the parable, as it says here, in Christ Object Lesson, page 406, it says, lingering near the bride's house are 10 young women robed in white. Each carries a lighted lamp and a small flagon for oil. All are anxiously watching for the appearance of the bridegroom. But there is a delay. So it did not say, but there is a disappointment. There was no disappointment in the parable in Matthew 25, but only delay. But there was no delay to the experience of William Miller. So, brothers and sisters, although there are many shepherds and believers mocking us, deriding us, but we know that our experience is found in the prophecy. And according to Testimonies for the Church, Volume 2, I would like to read here on page 100. 192. It says, a company was presented before me. So it was inscribed in singular form. There is a group of people, a company, that was shown by God to Sister White. It says here in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 2, page 192, a company was presented before me in contrast to the one described. They were waiting and watching. Their eyes were directed heavenward, and the words of their master were upon their lips. What I say unto you, I say unto all. Watch ye therefore, for ye know not when the master of the house cometh, at even, or at midnight, or at the cock-crowing, or in the morning, lest coming suddenly he find you sleeping. Then it says, the Lord intimates a delay before the morning finally dawns. Who intimates the delay? It is God. Therefore, God's people cannot be held responsible with such experience because it is God who intimates a delay. It says, the Lord intimates a delay before the morning finally dawns, but He would not have them give way to weariness, nor relax their earnest watchfulness, because the morning does not open upon them as soon as they expected. The waiting ones were represented to me as looking upward. They were encouraging one another by repeating these words. The first and second watches are past. We are in the third watch, waiting and watching for the master's return. There remains but a little period of watching now. I saw some become weary. Their eyes were directed downward, and they were engrossed with earthly things, and were unfaithful in watching. They were saying, in the first watch we expected our master, but we are disappointed. But who are they who say disappointed? That is the wicked, not the righteous. We thought surely he would come in the second watch, but that passed, and he came not. We may be again disappointed. We need not be so particular. He may not come in the following watch. We are in the third watch, and now we think it best to lay up our treasure on the earth, that we may be secure against want. Many were sleeping, stupefied with the cares of this life, and allured by the deceitfulness of riches from their waiting and watching position. This vision of Sister White is really the experience of the layman's movement, because we have many brothers and sisters which no longer with us at this present time. Why? Because they thought that they were disappointed. Brothers and sisters, they did not know that in the vision of Sister White, as recorded in the Bible, God's people must experience delays. And there are 3 delays, because there are only 4 watches. There must be 3 delays, brothers and sisters, and that is pointing to 3 periods of time. But we are now in the period by which God the Father declared there will be no more delay. There will be no more delay. There is time no longer. Now let us read, brothers and sisters, here in The Consecrated Way to Christian Perfection. It says here, page 105 and page 106, Consecrated Way to Christian Perfection. And this, as we have already quoted, is itself according as he hath declared to his servants the prophets. It is not alone the prophet of Patmos who declared that in this time, even now in our day, the mystery of God should be finished. Do not forget that declaration. The mystery of God should be finished. For when the angel of God made this proclamation in the vision of the prophet of Patmos, he had already and long before declared the same thing to his servants, the prophets. And this proclamation on Patmos was only the declaration of the angel, that which God had long before declared to his servants, the prophets, should now surely be accomplished, and that with no more delay. No more delay. The experience of delays are already in the past. And we are now in the period of the declaration of God the Father that there will be no more delay, no more extension. The days could no longer be prolonged. And it says, the full proclamation of the angel is this, and the angel which I saw stand upon the sea and upon the earth lifted up his hand to heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that therein are, and the earth and the things that therein are, and the sea and the things which are therein, that there should be time no longer, meaning delay. So the significance of that statement, there shall be time no longer, meaning there will be no more delay. It says, but in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he hath declared to his servants, the prophets. Revelation 10, verse 5, 6, and 7. And I call the mystery of God as the infallible proof. The infallible fruit must be revealed. The infallible fruit must be unfolded. Because there is time no longer. God could no longer prolong the days. In reality, one of the reasons why God allowed delays, why God permitted the time to be extended, to be prolonged, in reality, it is for our own good. Not only to you, but as well as to us. Because we are not yet ready. We are not yet worthy But in the last added provisionary time, that is the time when God says there will be no more delay. And that's what we are studying, brothers and sisters, to prove to you that we are now in the last year added provisionary time. Here in 2TG, number 46, it says here, 2TG number 46 on page 22, with what unwearied love did Christ minister to Israel during the period of added provision. So his care and labor for you are not lessened, but increased. Still he says, I, the Lord, do keep it. I will water it every moment, lest any hurt it. I will keep it night and day. If it bear fruit, well, and if not, then after that, the heart that does not respond to the divine agencies becomes hardened until it is no longer susceptible to the influence of the Holy Spirit. Then it is that the word is spoken, cut it down, why cumbereth it the ground? This parable explains that Christianity is plant-like. It is like a fruit tree. Moreover, it explains that God is very patient with us in our Christianity. For in the parable, only after the third fruitless year would the Lord consider cutting down the barren fig tree, and even then, he was convinced to wait still another year. Thus we see that we are given plenty of time in which to make good, plenty of time to begin bearing fruit. There is, nevertheless, as in the parable, no fruitless tree to be spared beyond the fourth parabolic year. Remember, that is the focal point of the message in Revelation chapter 7. Hurt not the trees, brothers and sisters. But after the added year provisionary time will expire, the divine command will be given. Cut it down. Why cumbereth it the ground? Jesus Christ made it so plain. Here in 2SR 124, it says, 2SR page 124. I would like to read the statement. The human fiber of obedience to divine requirements being weakened. 2SR 124. The human fiber of obedience to divine requirements being weakened, and the simple inclinations strengthened from generation to generation. The nature of man cannot be better at this present time than with the disciple, asked Jesus, knowest thou that the Pharisees were offended after they heard this saying? So-called Christians, like the Pharisees, become offended when told of their errors and rebuked for their sins. But he answered and said, every plant which my heavenly Father hath not planted shall be rooted up. Let them alone. They be blind leaders of the blind. And if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch. Matthew 15, verse 12, 13, and verse 14. So, brothers and sisters, there is a boundary line. I would like always to remind, brothers and sisters, we are now living in a time by which we are almost arrived on the red line, the borderline, the boundary line. It says here in 2SR page 98, 2SR page 98, people have come to suppose they can do most anything under the guise of Christianity and get away with it. God will let them continue their course until they, like Belshazzar, have passed the boundary line of divine grace, and then he will call them to account. The boundary line of divine grace is almost finished. It is almost over. And we should not fool ourselves because we cannot deceive God. Testimonies for the Church, Volume 1, page 190, it says, "Dear friends, do not deceive your own condition." You cannot deceive God. Theodore says that sometimes even our own self. I remember that statement in 2SR on page 95. It says, a hypocrite, 2SR page 95. Now, I would like to read the upper portion. It says, the effectual means to cure such a well-devised plan of deception is a steadfast belief in that there is an all-seeing eye of God. There is an all-seeing eye of God who sees sin wherever it is and will bring it into judgment. A hypocrite may hide his sin from the eyes of others and sometimes from his own conscience, but can never impose upon God. Never we can impose upon God. Brothers and sisters, because God knows everything. So it would be better for us to acknowledge our failures than to evade the truth. It says here in 2TG number 17, page 8, it is better for all of us to acknowledge our failures than to evade the truth. For it is the truth that shall make us free. So it is better for all of us to acknowledge our failures than to evade the truth. For it is the truth that shall make us free. So brothers and sisters, to repeat again, Revelation 11 verse 2 is one of the most important subjects that we need to understand before everything is too late. Because Revelation 11 verse 2, the climactic point is the numbering of the 144,000 living saints. According to 2TG 14, page 16. And since we have been given the admonition to strive with all the power that God has given us to be among that special number, 144,000, 7 BC 970. Therefore, it is in absolute importance to know the prophecy concerning Revelation 11, verse 2, by which such verse is closely connected, brothers and sisters, to the one of the unrevealed prophecy in the days of Pentecost, by which it is very important, the 42 months prophecy, by which that prophecy is guaranteed by inspiration, as stated in 11 Symbolic Code number 8, page 3, it will be revealed prior to the close of provision. That the principal reason of such revelation is that we should not waste our time to clean ourselves. And second, we should not waste our time to get our divinely appointed work done in the church. And third, we should not waste our time in setting our own houses in order. We will continue this subject tomorrow, brothers and sisters, and hoping that the good Lord will bless us and will help us. We love you, brethren. Hope to see you in God's kingdom. Thank you very much for listening and viewing this program. Have a beautiful, wonderful evening.